Hello, everyone. Welcome to Kvetchfest. I'm Jen,
I'm Debbie.
and today we're going to be talking about humor. There's all kinds of different humor, of course. We're going to talk about Jewish humor and how humor shows up in relationships, and who knows where this conversation will take us, but maybe it'll be humorous. Maybe it won't be. That'd be funny if it wasn't.
That'd be ironic.
Yes. Yeah. I use humor a lot in my life. Probably the main part that I use it in is when I'm feeling uncomfortable. I tend to chuckle a lot at the end of a sentence or make jokes that maybe people don't understand. I'm pretty sarcastic, and I think people sometimes take me at face value and don't understand my humor sometimes, or maybe they just don't understand me. But that's another conversation. I'm kidding.
Oh, I feel like I have to get out a violin now. Yes. I have various size violins for these occasions.
Yes, I know you do. Quite the collection over there.
Yes. If I'm feeling like it doesn't really warrant that much sympathy, it's a teeny tiny violin.
Yes, I grew up with that. You used to do it between your fingers.
Yes. Teeny
Yeah.
tiny. Yeah. Well, still do it, but not
I know
with
you do. Yeah.
Well, I might do it with you.
You might. You might.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Keep me
totally.
humble, right?
Yeah. Now, you were saying that humor is perhaps an emotional response to things that we're feeling at the time.
Yeah.
And I think that, I use humor in uncomfortable situations to help me lower my stress level.
Well, that's where I
Yes.
get it from. So it's so funny to me because we think we are our own individual people, of course,
Right.
especially and I'm talking in the context of a parent-child relationship, but it's so interesting because I'm learning so much about myself through talking with you about the ways we show up in our social lives. Because, yes, you raised me, but then you become an adult and you go do your thing, you don't realize how much you actually are connected by how you were raised. And so I probably saw a lot of how you dealt with things and just emulated it in my own life, right? I
Oh,
love
yeah.
that.
Totally. And I understand that. I mean, the good, the bad, or the indifferent with the raising, whatever you took from it. Because I feel like if we could, and my mother would be still alive, your grandma, we would have another person here that came from as well.
Yes.
So my mother, she was an entertainer, and she was theatrical, and she was a singer. And unfortunately, I wish that I had appreciated that more during my growing up times. But, and maybe we'll speak to that in a bit, but I totally understand that she used singing, for one thing, as a sort of a response to what she was feeling at the time. And so even if she was angry, she would sing, and that would help her get over that. And I believe that I do the same exact thing. I will sing in moments of anger, sadness, happiness,
Oh my
whatever it
gosh.
is.
Yes. So a big part of, I have a huge memory of growing up with you, Mom, when I knew you were upset, but you were kind of trying to just work through it, and we would be in the car on the way to school in the morning or maybe to an errand, and when you would start singing in the car, I'd be like, oh, okay. Things are going in a direction where you're working through this. That's good. It made me feel calm. I just remember, when you would sing in the car, I'd be like, oh, okay, everything's going to be fine.
I'm glad you thought that. No, I think I use that as for various reasons, but mostly for stress reduction, maybe for self-preservation in certain times.
Yeah,
Definitely.
because there were definitely moments where you and I would sing in the car together, and that was just all fun, and
Oh,
there was
absolutely.
no other emotions going on except just having a good time. But yeah, I just remember the mornings maybe when I pissed you off or something. Like I was late because I was not a morning person, or the 10th time trying to wake me up in the morning to get to school, you know?
Right.
Yeah, but when you'd start singing, I was like, oh, okay, good.
Yes.
Just at ease, all right.
Yeah, I would make up songs too.
Oh,
Like
all
we
the
had the
time.
Friday song, and yeah,
Yeah,
you know,
the Friday
it's
song.
finally Friday. Woo,
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 woo.
woo.
Yeah. So I think for me, humor and singing were all intertwined. We're both intertwined with each other. I don't think that I could. I mean, I could have humor without singing, but to me, you could also be humorous through song, not just punchlines or one-liners. Yeah,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So yeah, I don't know. Your brother might listen to this, but do you remember when we were driving to San Francisco when he was looking at colleges and I was singing because I would pretty much sing the whole time because it was a long trip.
It's a long trip,
And
yeah.
he finally said, "Can we listen to the music the way it was meant to be sung?" I'm like, "Oh, all right."
Oh, wow. That's a
Yeah.
teenager moment right there.
Yeah, wasn't it? And I'm like, so I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. And I honored that and I sang like underneath because I have a very hard time, honestly. And note, I'm not casting aspersions on him. He was probably right in the moment for him. But I think that I have a very hard time understanding how people don't move to music when they hear it.
Yeah.
And also the singing part is a big, so I do kind of both. I'm going to be the one in line at a supermarket moving to the music that they play in the supermarket and
Me too.
that kind of thing. I have a reaction to that. And I think that comes, obviously that's generational. And I don't think my mother was that much of a dancer. She danced with my dad's stuff, but, and with her second husband, but my stepdad, but she wasn't great at choreography because she used to do benefit shows and they would have her doing dancing and stuff. And she's more of a freestyle person, but definitely the music thing when it came to singing was something that I was profoundly immersed in my whole entire childhood, and sometimes it embarrassed me because I remember
Oh, really?
when I was little walking home from school and I could hear her from the kitchen window that led out to a courtyard in the apartments we were living in down the street, and I was like, oh my god, I'm so mortified right now. And I would tell her to stop singing. And so that made, I mean, I got older and we talked about it, but
Yeah.
it just made me feel bad that I ever would have said something like that to her. But from my point of view, it was like, the whole world can hear you. You need to
Yeah.
not do that. You need to be less you right now.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Right. Can you just dial back? But yeah, but largely I was very happy that I had those moments with her. She used to play guitar and piano, and when I was younger, she would play guitar and we would sing together, and it was really fun. But yeah, I also think the humor part of it, when I think of my mother, sometimes I think the humor part of it was definitely to cover some wound. But she was funny. And I think I picked up on her sense of timing and when it was appropriate to be funny, because there's a whole bunch of stuff in my head that I think is funny that I never say because it also can be
Hurtful?
misconstrued or hurtful, misconstrued or inappropriate.
Yeah. I do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I just keep it to myself. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I feel like there's kind of a lineage of being a linguist within this, because I feel like your mom was a singer, you sang to me, and then now in my life, I mishmash? Is that the right word? I songs all the time together. So if I hear a beat that sounds like this one song, I'll put it together with another song that sounds like the same beat, and then I'll make jokes
Oh.
about it. Or I'm always making these connections musically in my head, and I think it makes sense to me, but I wonder how much of that is just how I relate to the world, or just how growing up with you would always be making up words and making up songs that were also made up of words. I mean, every word is made up, but you know what I mean, just words that didn't
Sure.
make sense. And I think that that's like this linguistics part of humor, or that kind of lineage of just being really aware of being vocal, if that makes sense. Just, it's really interesting to
No,
me
yeah.
to listen
No,
to you
totally.
talk about your mom, and then I know you raised me talking to me constantly. So I think that plays a huge role in how I perceive humor, and then how we navigate these situations humorously or with sing-songy tactics. And then also you were raised by an East Coast parent. So then, and you were also East Coaster. So I think there's this humor of the East Coast, which is kind of sarcastic, and a little bit dry. And I don't know how much that, like, people on the West Coast don't really understand that as much. So it's interesting living on the West Coast, but having East Coast humor. Because I think people on the West Coast think it's kind of mean, but I don't think so. I think it's just kind of like matter of fact. But maybe I'm just a really direct person in some ways, and the humor contributes to that in some way, and then it maybe gets me in trouble. I don't know. Do you experience that
Gosh,
part
there's
of
a
humor?
lot to unpack there. Yeah,
Oh my
if I can
gosh,
remember,
so much.
if I can remember it all. So,
That's
yeah,
cool.
the sarcasm definitely is in the eye of the beholder, if that's such a thing. I mean, it's a taste that some people just never acquire. And I think being Jewish as well, and there's an intonation that you might use when you're saying something to somebody that's meant to be sarcastic, but they don't hear that intonation. I remember saying to somebody that they were being an idiot, but I didn't mean it like you're an idiot. It was like, oh, you're just being an idiot about, it was, and I got majorly attacked for that. And I'm like, wait a minute, let me dial back and figure out why that was offensive to that person. I remember it's different when first of all, I didn't say you are an idiot. I said you're being an idiot. And secondly, it was the tone of my voice. I know you can parse hairs there, but
Yeah.
it was the tone that was supposed to more of a New York sort of sensibility, or the way that I was raised. And nobody ever really found that offensive unless you were angry and you were calling the person that. And this was around some silly subject that we were talking about. So it was kind of like, oh, that's just ridiculous. Instead, I didn't say ridiculous. And then I realized there's also sort of a cultural difference in the way people, obviously, well, that's a huge subject, but
Yeah.
obviously the way people understand humor, and how sometimes humor in other countries doesn't translate and to us. And so I understand that there's humor that I don't really appreciate, and I can understand perhaps why the person became famous for it, but doesn't really appeal to me. And usually when people are screaming their humor, that's not so much my thing. But I also don't like when music is screaming at me. So that's just my personality, I guess. So yes, the linguistic part of it I think is pretty right on, because first of all, my grandmother came into this country with a stopover in France, and she learned how to speak French at a very early age. I think she was about 5 when she finally got here. And when she got here, she spoke Yiddish and she spoke French, and she was learning to speak English, and she was very precise about her English. And I think it's because she didn't want to sound like she didn't know how to speak English, or that she was coming from a second language. So she would correct me all the time. Like I would say, like jewelry, and she would say, no, there's no additional E. It's jewelry. You need to say jewelry. So I was like, oh, so I think that because my grandmother would pick apart these words and tell me exactly how to pronounce them, that I have a tendency to do that with people who are close to me. I have an ear for that, and ear for that. See, not such a good ear, but I have an ear for that, and it rankles me if I don't hear it correctly, and I have to largely keep a lot of things to myself, because you want to have friends, not foes. But occasionally I will. My husband might not think it's occasional, but occasionally I will correct people, especially correct journalists on the news who make these ridiculous mistakes. And I'm like, okay, I'm not a professional, so if I make a mistake during this recording, we'll figure it out and maybe fix it. But they should not be making any mistakes. I don't care how human they are. This is their job, and they should be
You hold
saying
them to a
things
very high standard.
a high standard. Yes, my husband will say I hold everybody to a very high standard. But whatever.
Now that I think about it, that's probably true. Yeah.
Yeah, I do have, and I think that comes from my maternal grandmother. I didn't spend a lot of time with my paternal grandmother, so I can't speak to that. But my maternal grandmother was in my life most of my life,
Yeah.
and my entire life, pretty much, with the exception of about 6 months when I was still in New York and she came to California. But
Yeah.
so her propriety about language made a big impression on me. And so I was always concentrating on that. It
Yeah.
was serious to me to speak properly. And then the linguistic part of the singing was my mother who taught me because she was trained, who said, when you're singing, you have to finish the endings of words. So my ear was very trained to make sure that when you sing, you finish the N's, the T's, the S's, whatever it is. And so I expected that also when people speak. And often
Yeah.
when we speak casually, we we go right from one thing to another, and I'll cut myself off as well, and I won't necessarily finish something. But when you're doing something like singing in a song, you're supposed to, it might be old school now, enunciate correctly and say the word from start to finish.
Yeah.
And so I think those influences, you're right. So there's a lot of, not only is there the linguistics of figuring out how to say things and what words to use, but there's also just the love of words.
Yes, which I know you have, and I think I have.
I
a
have the
little bit
love
that
of
too.
words, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because my mother used to read to me when I was a kid, and to my brother as well. And I wasn't at home with my sister, but I'm assuming she did some of that with my sister because we're so far apart in age. But my mother would come in every night, and if she didn't read, she had memorized most of the things she had read. So she would come in and just recite.
Wow. That's
I know,
amazing.
right?
Yeah, that's cool.
And not only would she read or recite, but she would do all the voices of all the characters.
Yeah.
So when I was read something, everybody had a special. A lot of people do that. Really good readers do that when they read to children. But that was my first person before I went to school. And then, of course, during school that read to me. And my mother did not stop reading to me probably until I was, I'm going to say 13, maybe.
Oh, really? That's so sweet.
Yeah, I think. And she would come in and, yeah, she would recite things and, yeah, read things. And so I think and that's a theatrical component of reading in which she incorporated. And so all of that buoyancy rubbed off on me. And so I
Yes.
think the humor and the singing helps me to alleviate the feelings that I'm having that might be difficult to deal with by using those devices to help me feel better, to create the buoyancy where there isn't
Yeah.
buoyancy.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that makes so much sense. Because, well, I have a few questions, but one is, well, I'll just say this first. I know that I am an anxious person. You don't strike me as anxious as I am, but I definitely use humor and discomfort and when I'm feeling anxious or in new settings, of course. But then do you, and my question is, was your grandmother humorous? Like, what was that relationship like for you?
Yeah, that's so interesting that you say that. I think a lot of what I know about my grandmother, other than spending time with her, is my mother's oil and vinegar relationship with her. They didn't have, I know they loved each other, but they were very cantankerous with one another. And I think my mother had a hard time because I think my grandmother criticized her quite a bit as she was growing up. So I think there was some animosity there, which was sad. But when I was with my grandmother, but we had a lot of laughter, the three of us together when we were together. I do remember that. But I don't remember my grandmother outing herself all that much. She was kind of private and maybe shy. I did hear that she had played the piano. I never heard her play the piano. She didn't own a piano when they came to California, and I heard that she was a really good piano player, and I wished I had known that and heard that. I don't remember her singing. I do remember her just being light to be around at times, but I think she was more serious, and I think it was harder for her to move away from her hurt by using a device. I think she got too embroiled in her hurt to make fun of it, right? Or to have fun during it. And I needed to do that because some of the stuff that I was going through was really not good as an adult, and I didn't want, not only did I not want to sink too much into that, but I also didn't want you guys to be taken down by that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so humor
Yeah.
then is a protection.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I will say I wrote something down while we were talking earlier. There's all kinds of humor, as you said in the beginning, and one of them is self-deprecating humor. I think when I
Mm-hmm.
was younger, I used self-deprecation as a way to let people know I knew what they were seeing about me and they didn't need to tell me, so I can make fun of it in front of you. I don't do that anymore. I stopped doing that a long time ago because anybody who bullies you or makes fun of you for either the way you look or your personality really is obnoxious, and not one person on this planet doesn't know what they look like and who they are. Really. I mean, I don't mean who they are in terms of self actualization,
Right.
but hasn't looked in a mirror, hasn't realized what their mannerisms are, doesn't, they know.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't need some idiot to tell, now I'm going to use the word idiot in a different way. You don't need some idiot telling you about you. So what people who self-deprecate do is they stop that from happening by putting a shield up and saying, look at me, I'm the whatever. I'm the ugly
Mm-hmm.
one, I'm the short one, I'm the fat one, whatever it is, as a way to prevent them from coming towards you. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, self-deprecation doesn't prevent that.
That's true.
They still do it.
Yeah.
And it's not as funny as I think it used to be for me. And I wish people would. I think you need a little bit of self deprecation, obviously, to get through the world and to disarm people occasionally, but that should not be what you do because you should be accepted for who you are without that. And I think there was a comic, and I forget her name, but I think she's from Aussie,
Mm-hmm.
and she was using a lot of self deprecation. That was her act, and she was funny. But all of a sudden, one time she came on stage and she was not funny anymore. And she was telling them she was not going to do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And she was going to do something else. And I can't remember her name. I know we talked about her, and I can't remember who she is.
Hmm.
But
I know who you're talking about, and I'm also not.
yeah,
Yeah, their pronouns might have changed too. So
yes, I think so.
I think, yeah, maybe they use they them pronouns now. But yeah, I think I
Yes.
know who you're talking about. They're from Tasmania.
Mania. Yeah.
Is that right?
And I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I think so.
Yes.
And I think
Why
they
can't I
had
think of the name?
an awakening that
Yeah.
humor can still happen, but not at their own expense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think
Especially
that
when you already are
happens when
so marginalized. It's like, let's not.
yes,
Yeah.
let's not do that. And
Mm-hmm.
also, I think that once you become more comfortable with yourself and you
Mm-hmm.
know that this is who you are, basically, and you don't need to do that so much. You don't fear, you would hope you don't fear the other as much as you may have in your younger years or before you knew exactly who you are and could just be who you are. And I
Yeah.
know there's lots of people that don't use self-deprecating humor and they don't even understand why you would need to. Well,
Mm-hmm.
because they're the ones that are in the middle of the bell curve,
Right.
right? Basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, no, yeah. Humor wrapped up in song, wrapped up in words, incredible.
Absolutely. Yeah. Is there music or not music? Are there comedians or types of humor that you resonate with more than others? I know you
Well,
talked about it briefly, but
I think what came to mind was Sam Kinison, and I understood his humor, but the screaming part of it really bothered me. I didn't want to be screamed at.
yeah.
So, but that was the delivery, and that's, how that was his shtick. Physical comedy is always fantastic.
Yeah.
We like to laugh at people who fall flat on their face.
I know. Why is that?
Because I think we all fall flat on our face and we feel like we want to share that with somebody else, so it makes it
We need
less
a mirror.
right. Well, we need it to make it feel less embarrassing to us.
Yeah.
It's like Ellen DeGeneres in one of her stand-ups does a thing where when somebody trips, they look back to see what
What it
caused them
was.
to what
Yes.
it was. It's not them.
Yeah.
I'm okay. It was that stupid thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
and
want to deflect. Yeah.
right. Exactly. So I certainly love her humor, if you're going to talk about specific comedians, but I just like a good one-liner. And when I was teaching elementary school students, I also did some teacher training, but kids, we talked a lot about the dynamic three, which in writing, which is incredible in humor. I mean, really, if twos don't work, but threes work great.
That's true.
So,
Tell me
yeah.
more about the dynamic three.
The dynamic three is closing some piece of writing with I went to the zoo and it was inspiring, exciting, and there were lots of curiosities. You know,
Okay.
you do it
Yeah.
kind of like that, and that three rhythm is, and that's why you'll hear songs where they'll repeat a chorus or a refrain three times. Sometimes it's a little, sometimes it's more, but the
Yeah.
three is really works in comedy, especially.
I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah.
So that's a thing.
That's a thing. That's a
That's an
cool thing.
intentionality. Yeah.
Yeah. I know. I'd like to learn how to write a joke. I took a stand-up comedy class in college, and it was really fun. I wrote a whole thing and I performed it, but I want to do it again. That sounds fun and terrifying.
It's terrifying. I think that my humor is off the cuff. And lots of time, well, not, I won't say lots of times because that's going to sound really, really weird. But I do have written down a few things. But it's hard to write down things because my humor is in response to what somebody else says,
Yeah.
and it's
But see,
in the
but you write a
moment.
monologue about the response, right? So you can write your own
Right,
jokes based on someone
right,
else or your interaction. And I think a
exactly.
lot of comedians do that. I mean, they're storytellers, and you're a storyteller.
Sure.
So,
Yes.
there's,
Yes.
yeah, they just create this whole story and tell you about it.
I think that my first foray into comedy, well, see, my mother was, she watched all those, everything that she watched and all the celebrities that she was enamored with, which was pretty much all of them. She was hugely starstruck and couldn't wait to come to California. In fact, I was just talking to your brother about that, how she had this amazing autograph book of these celebrities that she would just accost on the street that she would see, and she would go up to them, and then the autograph book got stolen, and which is really a shame. But I remember being in the car with my dad, and she would say, "Jerry, pull over," and Gregory Peck is pumping gas at the 76 station. She would run up to him with a piece of paper. So she had a lot of famous people in that book, and when I came here, I was a little kid, and they would drive up with the Hollywood map and look at all the stars and all that. So it was an innocent, she was an innocent, I would say. It was an innocent time. It was different, and I'm glad I had that time. Yeah, so she was really inspiring to me in terms of what I watched on TV and what comedy was. So Danny Kaye, I mean, she was in love with Danny Kaye. And I wrote a letter to Danny Kaye.
You did.
Yeah, she told me. She goes, you can write to him. Like, he'll send you something. He did. He sent me an autographed picture and a letter, which I think I just chanced upon recently. I think I have it somewhere. But
cool.
yeah, she took me to see Soupy Sales when he was signing I think one of his first albums at CBS Studios, and I met him. I was 4.
Yeah.
But that memory is emblazoned. So the idea of what comedy was, and going back to listen to some of that comedy is just ageless.
Yes. That's
In
true.
The Court Jester, his comedy is ageless, and I think my mom liked giggles
Yeah.
and to laugh, and I think she may have been bored when people weren't as enthused.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
I think I'm the same way too. I really like theater and all of that, and so I want whoever I take with me to be jazzed about it. I want
Right.
to. It's one of those things where it's like you don't want to have the same experience as someone else because you're never going to have the same experience. But it's like, wasn't that fun? And if they say it was okay, then you're like, oh,
Right.
you didn't find that, whatever. Like, yeah. So that's a hard thing to navigate.
No, yeah, it is. I think that what I learned about that was when I became single, and I said to myself, you can no longer have experiences through the other person's reactions. I mean, it was
Yes.
intentional because I was really worried about that. How am I going to have my own experiences? I know some people are going to say, what the heck are you talking about? But for me, I was so inclusive that I wanted my experience to be sort of enmeshed with my partner's experience, right?
Same, yeah.
So when I couldn't do that anymore, it took me a while, but I realized, I can have my total solo experience, and it doesn't have to be anybody else's experiences. And so now when I go out with my husband and we see lots of theater and movies and stuff, or watch them at home, I have my experience, and I don't worry about what his reaction is going to be to that experience because he's having his own experience.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about that, but I'm not going to judge it because I had my wonderful experience. And sometimes I'm the last one laughing. And he mentioned to me the other night, when we go to the Amundsen or La Mirada, I think you're the last one clapping. I'm like, okay, yay me! I'm sure the actors dig that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah. And he didn't mean it condescending. He just like,
just
like
you. Or just a.
You have this
witnessing.
Exuberance. Yeah.
Well, I feel like you, me, and, well, I should re-say this. I think Grandma, you and I think we're all very passionate people.
Yes.
So I think when we're not around the same type of energy, it feels weird, if that makes sense. Like, I think we're just very exuberant people, and we expel a lot, and what's the word I want to say? Expel is one of them, but we're just very animated.
Yes. We want to lift those around us up into that same feeling.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. What is that? Bring me a higher love. I mean, it's like, it's like,
yes.
I just want to, everyone's just,
Yeah. Oh, I know.
Everyone
Bruce
around us to feel that way.
Yeah. So Bruce will come down in the morning and he'll say something and I'll change the lyric from the song into the song that he says.
That's what I'm doing. That's what I was talking about earlier. When I was saying I make up a situation or if something's pissing me off, I make it into a song, like what you're saying about Grandma. Like, I do that too, Mom.
Right. Or I can find a song that's already a song and just use that song. And he still goes about making his breakfast like I'm not doing anything. And here I'm doing this whole rendition that goes along with what he's doing. But
TikTok instead. But it's like those moments where it's like it's so good that if you got filmed, it would be terrible. But it's like you just feel like you're in your own performance. Yeah.
Right. And I say to him, I can turn pretty much anything you say into a song or a lyric or something from that's already exists. And he just goes about making his bagel.
Like, this is just a normal day for me, folks.
Right.
We have this attraction on your left. Debbie.
And reality on your right. Yeah. And I know he appreciates it, but he doesn't always. I want him to react all the time.
All the time.
To that.
I know. God, am I not your child? Every episode I say
this. Or sometimes I'll just say to him, like we'll be driving somewhere on the weekend, and I'm singing to a song on the radio, and he'll want to say to me. I said, "I'm sorry, I'm not going to listen until the song is over because I want to finish this up." Can you hold that thought? Right, because I'm like, you're stepping on my parade right now. Mm-hmm. I want to sing
having
to
a moment.
Right, whatever song it is, Beyonce or Sinatra, whatever it is. I have such a wide breadth of stuff I listen to. Yes, a huge range. So but I've given up because I'm old, more mature, I'm wiser. That this is a dig against me.
Right.
I just say this is what I want to do. Right. There's boundaries around that. I'm singing.
Yes.
Don't talk.
Yes.
I don't know. I mean, not always. I
understand that. I mean,
like that.
I know you aren't. And my partner does the same thing with me. They're like, oh, there's this new song that I listen to. Can we listen to it in the car? And sometimes during the song, an idea pops in my head where I have to tell them something. And then they're like, can we start the song over again? Because you talked through it. And I get the same way, too. I'm like, okay, so then they have to say, look, can we just listen to the song and we'll talk about it afterwards, or just hold everything that you want to say to me? And I'm like, okay, yeah, we can just listen to a song. But it is normally me, and I think I have probably undiagnosed ADHD, like I said, where I just have constant thoughts. Well,
that's good. You should have constant thoughts.
It is good, but it's problem-solving thoughts. It's how I can solve everything. It's that mac and cheese was really good last night. Whatever it is. I mean, there's so many different topics that are in my head at one point. So, yeah, it does help me because otherwise I just want to talk about everything or sing. Sing the song because I'm a big fan of singing as well.
Oh, yeah, I love to sing. Yeah.
Yeah.
My car is amazing for that because, I've sung in the car for 22 years now, this particular car that I have. First of all, the thought thing, before we had Google now has really changed my thought process in terms of there's a lot more thoughts, but I can squelch my curiosity much quicker by just going right to Google when I'm
Yeah.
thinking the thought or remembering to do that later. But when I was younger, and I'm sure many people have this, and we should, we have one thought, and I don't think this is ADHD. I think this is connective thoughts.
Oh,
So you're
yeah.
thinking about my dog did this, and then all of a sudden you wind up somewhere thinking about umbrellas
Oh,
because
yes.
one thought leads
my
into
gosh.
another thought, right?
Yes. A big
Yeah,
memory of my childhood is sitting in the back of your car on drives, either going back and forth from LA or whatever, but just on long drives anywhere where I would just be pondering out the window, thinking, just thinking. And that's how I,
which is wonderful.
yeah, because I would
And
just
wasn't it great?
ponder.
Well, I was going to
It
say,
was
wasn't it
great.
great that you didn't have a device
I am actually
that's
so
kept
happy.
you from pondering?
Yes, because I think about it now and I'm like, I need to really take a step back from my phone because I miss my thoughts. I miss pondering. Like, I have thoughts all the time, but it's different. And that's why I try to sometimes go on a walk without listening to anything or just be with my thoughts. And that's it. Because, yeah, that downtime that I used to have, even into my teenage years and early 20s, is like taken up by scrolling. And it's so sad because I want, it's one of those things where I used to think, I remember writing about this in college, could I just be, be myself in a room away from everything, away from all the noise, and I would just write or whatever it is, and I would just do that. But now it's like an effort to do something like that where you're just thinking like, can I just get away, and how do I make time for just my thoughts or just sitting down with yourself and thinking your own things and being humorous in your own way, because I think we're inundated with so many other voices now, and it's great because it feels connected, but it's also like, oh, I just want to have like my own original thoughts. Is that possible?
Yeah.
Can I do that? Yeah. Yeah.
No,
But
I
I
agree
think,
with you. And
yeah. Oh, go ahead.
well, I was just going to say what bothers me is when I see kids being pushed in strollers and their parents are scrolling. And
Yeah.
and I'm not, hopefully they're not doing it all the time, but the missed opportunity just walking with your child and hearing your child say something and respond to it, or bringing your child's attention to something and having a conversation about it or laughing about it or whatever, and everybody's plugged in, and where do those moments get to be?
Right, because
So
here's how it connects for me. I think you and I have similar humor and communication styles, and that's probably why we get along really well. And I wonder, we didn't have devices like that. Of course, we had TV and stuff, but how much will that change these generations where they're learning humor from so many other resources, which is also a great tool, and that's great. But it's interesting for me to think about because they're learning body language from so many other people because they're watching videos and that's cool. It's a great tool. Nothing against that. But you and I think, have this rapport because you communicated with me. We have a humorous background, or yeah, relationship, because you were very attentive to me. I'm not saying that you were all the time because, of course, what parent is? It's impossible.
right. For me, well, I have a hard time not attending, and so I've had to learn not to attend because I'm around lots of folks who don't attend to what
Yeah.
I've said to them, or don't think a response is necessary. Which is like, what do you mean a response is not necessary? I think if somebody says
Right.
something to you, acknowledging that they said something by just saying, "Oh, okay," or "Yeah, I heard ya," but not responding at all, I don't know what that means exactly. And so I don't like it when people say, "Well, I don't think that a response was necessary. I don't think I needed to respond to that." I'm like, "Oh yeah, from my point of view, yes, please, would you respond to it?" But I'm getting better at realizing that that's not maybe necessary. So I think as a parent, I was very responsive. There
Yeah.
wasn't a time where my kid would say something to me and I would completely ignore it. And I've seen parents do that, and it bothers me greatly. They'll be asking in a store, "Mom, what's that? Mom, what's that? What's that? What's that?" And they never get a response. And I want to go over to them and say, whatever it is, it's a tangerine. it's a green banana, whatever it is. I want
Yeah.
to just tell them because I'm like, why aren't you giving this kid information? And the reason I say that is because being that I was in education, lots of kids come without a lot of words for things
Yeah.
because nobody has spoken to them and
Yeah.
they don't have a lot of vocabulary. And
Mm-hmm.
it's really helpful from 0 to 5 if you talk to your children so that when they come to school, they have some foundation you can build on. But when there's no foundation, you're backfilling the entire school year. And it's
Yeah.
very hard for kids to progress.
Mm-hmm.
And that worries me because I don't want parents to take a back seat to all the mishigas that everybody has their hands on nowadays
Yeah.
because they really need, unless you've got an incredibly egregious parent, they really need the parent as the first teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So, and how does a kid get to know who you are as a human being and your sense of being and your exuberance or lack thereof, your
Mm-hmm.
humor? How do they get to know that if you're not discussing? It's too late to start
Yeah.
talking to your kid at 16. Sorry.
Yes.
That's from birth. You
Yeah.
keep talking about all these important things.
Mm-hmm.
And you do it with your best foot forward and as much humor as you can. And parenting
Yeah.
is not the subject today, but there's a little snippet of it.
Yes.
But and I know even with you, there were times where you weren't appreciating the humorous ending to things that I wanted to give out. But that's okay because that's the time,
Yeah.
that's the age,
Yeah.
right?
That's true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah.
know. It's sad that when
So
you're an
that's
adult and you
okay.
look back and you're like, oh, I didn't want to treat you that way. It was just the hormones. You know? It's awful.
Well, we also feel as parents, there's times where we didn't have our best moments, and we try not to wallow in that and regret that as well.
Yeah.
So,
That's
because we're
true.
all just human beings, and we do the best we can in
That's
the
true.
situations that we're in, and we have
Mm-hmm.
to give ourselves grace. So, when things get serious, I wrote down here Jews and humor.
Mm-hmm.
Jews have had a serious lot in life. They have a history of not such great treatment, as do many ethnicities and
Mm-hmm.
cultures, but
Mm-hmm.
particularly to us, because we're coming from that point of view, because that's what we were raised in. I think humor was a way to help get a leg up
Yeah.
on, yeah, the atrocities and sadness and just that they dealt with, just like other cultures do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's so amazing about humor and music, because
Mm-hmm.
they're absolute, not only are they uplifters, they also can drive a point across without
Yeah.
being necessarily a hammer,
Yes. I
right?
agree. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they can be used as really, maybe we should be thinking of this as we move forward, that humor is not only is it a linguistic part of life, but it's also a social justice part of life. Because
Yeah.
without humor in itself and without lyrics and songs, we may not move past or educate those that don't really understand some of the injustices.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
so
Well,
it's a big thing.
it's a big thing, and we can end with saying I was gonna say something about LGBTQ humor because I think there's also not only is humor can be universal, but there's also pockets of humor where it's like for a certain group because it
Sure.
helps people understand their lived experience. And I think I obviously we want to find things in the media that we relate to or that make us feel at home and make us feel understood. And I think sometimes humor, that kind of humor, or not that kind of humor, but maybe particular humor isn't for everybody, and it doesn't have to be. But I also think there is still a universality with queer comedians talking about queer stuff and queer lifestyles or queer experiences. And I think about you, and I'm like, I think that you're pretty open-minded to lots of different things, and I think you're just interested in people's lived experience and like the human aspect of people's lives. And I think that's what comedy is all about, and what humor is too, is just trying to understand life and our experiences. And at least that's what I'm drawn to. So I know for me, it's like, yeah, I've listened to so many different kinds of comedians, but right now it's like, oh, I just want to listen to other queer people because that's they haven't had their chance in the spotlight until recently. We haven't had a lot of stories about that. And I've been enjoying listening to a lot of queer comedians lately.
Oh, absolutely. And I have done that too. And I think I think what you said was spot on. And I think that humor can be universal. It should be universal in one way. I'm going to say the should word. We should open ourselves up to listening to things that we may have thought were not for us and then find out that it is. I think that anything that crosses over into different pockets, as you said, helps us not really makes us more homogenized rather than think about the other all the time, that we're all humans grappling. We all have different experiences, but but through those experiences, we should be able to get to know each other better. And that for me right now, maybe it's because I have more time to think about it because I'm not, doing the tasks that I did for money on my job. Now I have more time to ponder, and sometimes, like we said earlier, sometimes it's under the surface, but I think it all comes back. It's going to sound cheesy, but it really all comes back to love.
Yeah.
I think humor and music, all those wonderful things that make a culture, if we looked at it more as sameness rather than differences, we would all just come back to that, which is love. And that's really what I was trying to impart I think naturally I was trying to impart that onto my family by being the person that I was. This is the way I love you. And hopefully that resonated. It sounds like it kind of did with you. And maybe that with your partner, you're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
This is the way I, love you by
Yes.
giving that part of me, which I think is some of my best parts.
Yes.
Right?
Sometimes we have to teach our partners our humor style. Because sometimes
Absolutely.
It's, or it, jabs where it should have just not. It
Right.
shouldn't be hurtful, but it doesn't
Right.
need to be. So yeah, it's like one of those things where, like anything, you have to learn about your person and then go learn how you both have humorous styles, and they might be different, just like your communication styles. And yeah, but that's a whole
right.
other.
No, but
that's a
it's
whole
true.
other
And I
thing.
think that you were saying teach them. They also are teaching us.
Yeah.
So there may be times where I really have a great comeback and I'm like, just keep that to yourself. It's not going to work.
Swallow that.
It's not going to work here, but it might work over there. So, yeah. So,
Yeah.
I think that
We have to be conscientious.
we do, but we also, sometimes we just want to also, without hurting anybody, just be funny because it comes naturally to us and it just, I don't know, it lifts the day up.
It does. It does. Do you have a joke to end on?
I wish I had prepared for that.
What do you mean?
That would have been great if I had a joke. Now I'm searching in my head for a joke.
Yeah, the file folder says jokes on
Right.
it.
But what I would suggest, if anybody's listening, is to go to YouTube and listen to Danny Kaye's little spiel about the vessel with the pestle and the brew that is true on YouTube.
Yeah,
because
that's a
if
good
you
one.
need to feel better, nobody does it like him.
Yeah.
So a shout out to Danny Kaye, and I will say that.
Okay.
And I will also, let's see, it's Friday. I will also sing the song. It's finally Friday. Woo, woo, woo. It's finally Friday. Woo, woo, woo. So there we go. Yay.
Yeah, that lives in my brain rent free forever. I sing it to myself all the time.
And I don't charge royalties.
Maybe you should.